Death is everywhere when it comes to movies. Watching someone pass away, whether peacefully, violently, or somewhere in between, can be an incredibly powerful emotional moment. Yes, some of these are nameless henchmen or background characters, but others have formed a genuine connection with the audience over their time on screen. What can arguably be more devastating than anything, however, when done well, is an off-screen death. Whether for shock value or in order to leave exact details up to the individual viewer, there is something about not seeing what happened that can make it so much harder to process. So with that in mind, I'm Ellie for Whatculture, and these are 10 devastating off-screen movie deaths. Number 10, Llewelyn Moss, No Country for Old Men. The first of two Coen brothers efforts on this list, No Country for Old Men is arguably their masterpiece. When you think of the film, your mind may immediately go to Anton Chigurh, one of the most menacing villains in cinematic history, or perhaps Sheriff Bell's closing monologue. But what about Josh Brolin's Llewelyn Moss? After stumbling on what remained of a drug bust gone south and a bag full of cash, Moss was inadvertently thrust into something of a game of cat and mouse, with Chigurh hot on his heels. Though it was these two men who dominated the film's screen time, the story was always surrounding Tommy Lee Jones's Sheriff Bell, the old man who was struggling to find his place in the country. This was a point that was partway driven home by the manner of Moss's death. Josh Brolin's character met his end very abruptly off-screen while the focus was on Chigurh's pursuit of him. This was a huge shock to the audience, as the manner of his death all but confirmed that the protagonist of the story was never truly its subject, and such a moment changed everything. Number 9, Gorr's daughter, Thor: Love and Thunder. While the goofy humour of Taika Waititi was a welcome change in 2017's Thor: Ragnarok, things had been taken way too far in Love and Thunder. Goofy turned into downright silly. Having said that, this tone was at odds, however, throughout the 29th MCU installment with the darker tone of Gorr the God Butcher's story. This was demonstrated immediately as the movie opened with one of the most harrowing sequences ever produced by Marvel Studios. After being outcast by his people, Christian Bale's Gorr wandered the scorched desert with his daughter, played by India Hemsworth, devoid of food, water, or shelter. The soon-to-be God Butcher prayed to his deity for help, but nothing came. One moment, the small child was telling her father that she was tired, and the next, Gorr was lying next to her grave. Nothing could have prepared anyone for this. Unsurprisingly, this drove Gorr's motivation, and the fact that his god laughed in his face about his loss brought on the promise of his vengeance. His daughter may have been brought back by eternity before the story finished, but that didn't take away from such a heart-wrenching image 2 hours prior. Number 8, Rooster Cogburn, True Grit. There aren't many movies that are remade to be better than the original release, but one that fits this criteria is True Grit. The Coen brothers, along with Haley Steinfeld, Jeff Bridges, and Matt Damon, produced something extremely moving. Though the three at the top of the cast list all put in outstanding performances, Steinfeld in particular, arguably the most emotional scene in the whole thing came without any of them present, 25 years removed from the bulk of the story itself. After helping Mattie Ross find the man who killed her father and saving her life from what would have been a fatal snake bite, Rooster Cogburn and Mattie went their separate ways. It wasn't until a quarter of a century later that they planned to see each other again, when Rooster invited Mattie, at this point portrayed by Elizabeth Marvel, to come and see his new show. Unfortunately, after everything they went through together, Mattie never got to see Rooster again, as he passed away just before she arrived to see him. They spent 25 years apart, and when they were finally to reunite, they missed each other by just 3 days. I mean, that's just cruel. Number 7, Tracy Mills, Seven. Realistically, you could make an argument for most of David Fincher's films being his masterpiece. Seven potentially more than most. The story of Detective Mills and Somerset chasing a serial killer is dark, gruesome, and utterly compelling. With Kevin Spacey's John Doe eluding Mills and Somerset for the majority of the film, until he decided to reveal himself, almost all of the deaths in Seven happen off-screen, and some of them are pretty damn brutal. Easily the worst, however, is the death of Detective Mill's wife, Tracy. The murderer made a point of killing based on the 7 sins, taking the lives of those he felt were guilty of committing one of them to make a set. However, Tracy was innocent. She was used as a pawn to instigate the final 2 sins: Doe's envy of their happy life and Mill's wrath. The hot-headed detective, played by Brad Pitt, had been a target of John Doe, and he was manipulated perfectly. How else to get him to submit to his anger than to not only murder his innocent wife, but to present to him a box with her head inside? There may have been crime scenes created by Doe that were physically hard to look at, but this was his most brutal murder by far. Number 6, Ray Arnold, Jurassic Park. Even over 30 years after the release of Jurassic Park, the iconic movie still holds up thanks in no small part to the phenomenal special and practical effects. The dinosaurs looked as real as you could imagine and were truly a sight to behold both in 1993 and now in 2025. However, Steven Spielberg not only utilised the monsters to their fullest potential on screen, he also maximised their effectiveness off it as well. Think how the T-Rex devoured the cow without ever being seen, or the kids suddenly realising that the greatest predator of all time had taken the goat without them even noticing. Then there is Ray Arnold. Samuel L. Jackson's character went off to try and turn the power back on in the park and was soon followed by Ellie Sattler, essentially heading into the unknown with velociraptors on the loose. While being chased, Ellie felt Arnold's hand on her shoulder, though her temporary relief was replaced soon by horror as she saw the arm was no longer attached to his body. Leaving what happened to the audience's imagination arguably sold the ferocity and ruthless nature of the dinosaurs, and quite how dire Ellie's situation was, more than anything that could have happened on screen. Number 5, Rachel Simon and Henry Laeddis, Shutter Island. Shutter Island is a movie simply dripping with mystery at every turn, offering more questions than answers throughout the whole thing. One of the biggest enigmas audiences are forced to puzzle out is the existence of Andrew Laeddis. Laeddis is a character unseen for much of the story, and is the reason for Leonardo DiCaprio's Teddy Daniels taking the case on Shutter Island in the first place. The former lit the match that killed his wife, and he was there to find him. He never did though, because Daniels was in reality a fictional character Laeddis created for himself after he killed his wife in order to deal with his guilt. Well, why did he kill his wife? Because he returned from work one day to find that she had drowned their 3 beautiful children in the lake behind their home. The panic of Laeddis upon discovering them and seeing him drag their lifeless bodies from the water in a futile attempt to resuscitate them is as unpleasant as it gets. This is what starts Leonardo DiCaprio's character on the path to his eventual lobotomy, something that he seemingly chose willfully rather than live with both what he and his wife had done. Number 4, Ellie, Up. Disney Pixar has built a reputation over the years of pairing childish wonder brought by the likes of sentient toys with complete and utter heartbreak, such as said toys facing their fiery demise together in a furnace. As part of this, there is no shortage of painful death scenes from the studio. The same can be said about Ellie from Up, though the sheer abruptness of her death arguably makes this far worse. The first 10 minutes of the film take the audience through the lives and relationship of Carl and Ellie, from being childhood sweethearts through their marriage and struggles to conceive a child, before Ellie's declining health and ultimate death. Cue the uncontrollable, snot-nosed, ugly crying, no matter who you are. The relationship Carl builds with Russell throughout the film is ultimately made more heartwarming by his pain and losses. But damn, did Pixar have to do this to us right out of the gate? Ugh. Number 3, T'Challa, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. With Black Panther Wakanda Forever, Ryan Coogler had the horrible job of addressing the tragic death of Chadwick Boseman, who passed in 2020. By all accounts, the man was as much a hero off-screen as he was on it, and the decision was made not to recast T'Challa, but rather to lay him to rest. The Black Panther sequel dealt with the Wakandan king's death with grace, and it was truly heartbreaking. The very first scene showed Shuri's lab in a frenzied panic trying to find a way to save T'Challa's life before Queen Ramonda entered to deliver the news that her son had joined the ancestors. The rest of the story showed Wakanda dealing with the loss of their king and protector, in particular Shuri, Ramonda, and Lupita Nyong'o's Nakia. But it was so much more than this. Both T'Challa and Chadwick Boseman's presence were felt throughout, as his friends and family on screen and the audience watching shared their grief. The entire film was a beautiful dedication to a wonderful actor and human being. From T'Challa's death at the start to both Shuri and Letitia Wright's solemn contemplation at the very end. Number 2, Dominic, the Banshees of Inisherin. Behind the relatively simple and humorous narrative of Brendan Gleeson's Colm abruptly wanting to stop being friends with Colin Farrell's Porrig, there was a far more heartbreaking story surrounding Dominic. The young man was something of an outcast on Inisherin. He was abused by his father, and even when he looked up to Porrig as something of a role model, he was ultimately let down. In spite of this, however, Dominic took everything in his stride and was arguably one of the cheerier characters on the island. Having built up the courage to ask if Siobhan could ever see herself falling for someone like him, he was knocked back. After Siobhan left Inisherin for the mainland, Porrig wrote his sister a letter, detailing, among other things, Dominic's death. He told that the young man had fallen in the river, but it seems more likely that he jumped after his conversation with Siobhan. He had been dealt a tough hand in life, and this appeared to have been the final straw. Number 1, Rosie Betzler, Jojo Rabbit. To say that Taika Waititi is known far more for his silly comedy above anything else, he knows how to pull out a devastating scene here and there. Gorr's daughter isn't the only character he's killed off screen to immense effect. The director followed his MCU debut in 2017, 2 years later with Jojo Rabbit. Jojo was a member of the Hitler Youth, who idolized the regime he was born into without questioning any of it. His imaginary friend was even Hitler himself, played by Waititi. But he was soon shown that the world was far more complicated than he realized. His mother, Scarlett Johansson's Rosie, was harboring a Jewish girl. She risked her life for this girl and ultimately paid the price in the end. Audiences didn't see Rosie get caught, and they didn't see her get hanged. Instead, they just saw her shoes dangling in the town square when Jojo did, with no more warning than he had. Earlier in the film, when Rosie was walking on a wall at Jojo's head height, he tied her shoes for her. And here, he saw her shoes at that same height once again after innocently following a butterfly into the square, only this time there was nothing underneath them. This was one of the most haunting scenes in recent cinematic memory.